The year after, no warnings about the year after. Try to remember what it was that was gained. The year after, we listened for sounds of rain. They said never again. But a successful war is never won, and successful tanks and successful guns, they fired out at mothers' sons. Bombed out buildings 1, 2 and 3, prop up our great economy. So raise a toast to this glorious shore, and remember what you're fighting for in this successful war. The year after, the days after, happy ever after, aren't what we imagined them to be. Man versus weather, horses and soldiers drowning together in a human-made hell. All the stories you hold but will never tell, 'cause a successful war is never won, and successful tanks and successful guns, they fire out at mothers' sons. Bombed out buildings 1, 2 and 3, prop up our great economy. So raise a toast to our glorious shore, and remember what you're fighting for in this successful war. 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 Oh, it's successful war is never won. Successful tanks and successful guns, they fire out at mothers' sons. Bombed out buildings 1, 2 and 3, prop up our great economy. So raise a toast to our glorious shores, and remember what you're fighting for in this successful war.
Thank you very much. I don't know if that set me up for a failure, but we shall see. So yes, as introduced, my name is Kay, and yeah, I'm going to explore various things today around my personal experience of navigating the theme lost and inevitably trying to find myself, and how that then gives more context to the work that I do as a result of that. So yeah, this is me, as I'm sure aesthetically is not confusing for people to make the connection that I wear colors all the time. But yeah, this is me and a myriad of things that I do. That's a very long job title, I know that. But before all of that happened, I'm going to take you through just the journey that kind of got everything started. And here I am. And if anyone knows anything about African parents, that is somewhat standard at that age where you have no choice as to what to wear. But actually, in hindsight, I look back and think that was a dope suit. But that was not my choice. But what's really interesting is, I look at this image, which is one of the very few images that I have of myself as a child, and I see what I recognize inside of me. But for a long time, that was lost. This, as I highlighted there, this wide-eyed and boundlessly curious child, and growing up in an environment that culturally is very, I would say, not as conducive for, I guess, out of the norm thinking. So growing up as a child, boys are supposed to do this, boys are supposed to wear this, boys are supposed to say this, boys are supposed to earn this amount of money, boys are supposed to blah, 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 blah. So growing up as a young kid and inherently having this desire to be curious, to explore things, the environment that I grew up within did not facilitate that, did not make that conducive for me to be able to wonder and fail at things and figure out, okay, maybe that's not my choice of my things to do. But so at this age was probably the earliest memory I have of me just being just free, in that I had so many things that I was playing around with as a child, and even just the things that I wore, because I think I vaguely remember there was a couple of choices of suits, and there was a black one and there was one that my mom really wanted me to wear, which was more like navy color, and I saw this one, I was like, I'll wear the purple. And I'm sure a lot of people at that party, because this was, I think, my birthday party, a lot of people at that party was probably saying to my mom, why is he wearing purple suit? But she just like, well, that's what he wanted to wear. And I remember that somewhat vaguely, that was perhaps the only time I think I got permission from my mom to do what I really wanted to do. And anything above that age kind of started to become much more constricted and more streamlined in terms of what my options were. So as an adult, I guess, born in London, and then at the age of 3, I moved to Nigeria. So this photo was taken in Nigeria. And at the age of 8, I moved to California, which is a different kettle of fish for an African child. And being in that environment, I guess, not having my father in that environment and just kind of learning to navigate what it means to be a boy without a male figure, and actually not also having my mother around either. So I was absolutely lost from a masculinity perspective. I was absolutely lost from a love relationship with a parent's perspective. And all of these things mixed together in a boiling pot. I'm sure we can sort of imagine what type of trajectory a boy like that potentially would kind of start to follow. And what inevitably started to happen was, as a kind of option of trying to fill in that void, what tends to fill that void in the absence of a male figure or love-in sort of direct relationship with a parent is often there are men that turn up and take on that role, in some cases positive, in most cases negative. And ultimately from that perspective, my trajectory started to kind of fall down much more of a negative pathway in terms of the associations I was making, because every human being has 5 psychological human needs, and one of those is a sense of belonging. So because I was devoid of a family environment, I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere. And ultimately that belonging led me down a pathway of associating with people who frankly were up to a lot of negative things. So my mom got really scared of what my trajectory was, because if you know anything about Nigerian families or African parents, everybody is your parent that's an African. So when my mother's friends saw me with somebody, she's like, your son is getting into gangs, which is clearly far from the truth, but there were some associations there. So anyway, my mom asked me to come back home for a summer holiday, which ended up being quite a lot of years. And I was in a boarding school there. And a lot of things happened around that way. Me, again, really trying to figure out who I was and what I was supposed to be doing. But again, not having the platform to be able to explore and express what those things could be. So a couple of things led to a couple of things. And there was a moment in Nigeria where I did get stabbed, which was interesting because my mom was scared of what my trajectory would be in California, and then takes me to Nigeria, which is supposed to be the safest place, and that happens. And anyway, then she brings me back to London, which is where I decide to go. Well, I say I decide. I was told I need to go to university because that was important for my life trajectory. And while I was in university, I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to be, but I knew it wasn't to be a doctor, which is what my mom's dream was. My sister's a lawyer, and she's great at that. But so the next important thing from an African family perspective is either you're a doctor or something along those lines. So for me, I was in university doing biomedical engineering as a step towards being a doctor, and I absolutely hated that. And along that, I started to really ask myself, actually, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want to explore in my life that would give me purpose? And then I kind of started to find my voice and how I could use art as a tool to kind of help me navigate myself back to the things that I think are inherently who I am. And those, in that picture of me being 7 years old, what I saw and what I remember in that eyes is what I started to try and reconnect to, trying to find the lost, curious boy who I was. So I created a piece as part of a project, which I'm going to talk about at the latter part of this talk. And this piece kind of talks about the navigation of this young child without a male figure and how that world looks. So I'm just going to play this piece for you guys, and then we'll go from there. No, that's it. It's so beautifully saddening how an intended walk in the park could evoke memories that seemingly easy to spark. You only needed to see the young boy and his convoy of love, hand in hand with a male figure you can only assume to be his father, attaching his knee pad and fastening his helmet. Slightly out of sight is his black bike, which, in all accounts, is simply just a black bike. But to you, it's way more than that. It signifies the void that even a great mother lacks. The know-how to fill these incredibly huge size 10 boots with any real ease. So the bike remains a signifier of stolen moments that he robbed from you. Where was the police when this robbery was taking place, you ask? But instead they want to randomly stop and search you in the name of knife crime. But before I go down a black hole of sad tropes of black experiences, I will try to keep it to just this lack of black dad experience at least. How can something so simple as seeing a bike stoke up such strong emotions, you wonder? So I ponder. We've been taught to dig deep in a space in our hearts and given no real keys to access them. There we bury treasure chests of unwanted memories that bring us pain and sadness. Then, all of a sudden, an interruption on this road to oblivion unearths this pavilion where the pain lays bare. I forever blamed his frame for the years. To disappear was his favorite act. It's a shame he never reappeared like David Blaine, but alas, I never believed in magic anyway. Cause so many times I closed my eyes and reopened them hoping that there he lay by my bedside, reading me a lullaby and tending to my wounds sustained from the exhilarating bike ride. But instead, what I woke up to was a barely upright two-pack poster. And every night he would look right over the void he tried to fill with the hopes to spare drama. So me he had singing, "Dear Mama." But she was always too busy playing mother and father, so a bike was the least of her priorities. All this while, I just thought bikes were just never my thing. I just thought I disliked cyclists because they thought they owned the roads dressed in their nicest. Fancy lycra and shiny tight stuff. Helmets with headlights for the dark times. Just to see what lies ahead. So I tell you, bikes are not your friend. Okay, scratch that. That's just my anger and pain. Let bikes teach you a thing or two about riding bumps again and again. Getting up from the ground more times than you've ever fallen. Ain't no shame in that. Let them teach you the feeling of freedom as the wind blows through your hair. Let them teach you how to ride for yourself and how to stand on your own too. The balance might be tricky, but that's just how life molds you. The key is balance. Ride, young boy. Ride. Ride, young boy. Ride. Great. So that's a piece which is called Boy on a Bike, and I still cannot ride a bike, so anyone that could help with the teaching lessons, I'm happy to take that. But the bike is a metaphor, and as I'm sure most people could perhaps get from the piece, it's this relationship with a void and how a bike signifies that, and it always has for me. And it's one of the reasons that gives context to kind of the work that I do with young boys particularly, because that is a wound that I have been healing, trying to find a way to understand and to navigate myself in a world where male, especially black male presence is one that has a perception, a stereotype and an actuality in terms of the presence or lack thereof in homes, especially homes that have young boys in them. So, as part of that journey to try and find myself, I created a project, and the first project I created was called Tribe, where I went to spend 6 weeks in Ethiopia to live with a lot of native indigenous tribes and to explore what life, especially masculinity, sexualization, body image, what these things are in that environment, which is devoid of social media, internet, and all the things that I guess we as human beings in the Western world come to be accustomed to. And one of the most important things is brotherhood. And I do a lot of work with young boys, and when I show this image, one of the first things they say is, "Oh my God, great brothers, love," all of that. And then I say, "But these boys are friends." And they're like, "Oh my God, no way. How can they be hugging each other so close? They almost kissing," you know? And that is one of the biggest things around, because when I look at this, I think this is ultimately what I remember as a kid when I was 6, you know, playing with the kid down the street in Nigeria, and we all just hugging and playing, and sometimes we're running around naked. And that's the authenticity of what being a child is. That's the authenticity of what it means to be a boy, because actually science and research has shown that when boys are born, boys are much more emotional. They cry much more. They demand their parents' attention much more. But because of the patriarchal structure and how mothers are fearful of the fact that they could turn their boy into a sissy, they then start to withhold a lot of that emotion, that love, that care that they often are willing to give to girls. So actually, by nature, boys are this. But somewhere along the way, we are lost. We are lost in trying to reconnect with what our emotions, what our soul really wants. And having these times in an environment like that really started to reconnect me to what I knew I once had. So these boys, photographing them and just, you know, seeing the genuine expressions of masculinity in a different way. You know, the extremely expressive aesthetic that I saw with a lot of these cultures and these men in these environments, that was just naturally how they expressed themselves, was just, again, a rekindling of this journey of me trying to find who I knew that I inherently am, and just kind of exploring these communities. There's so much more to these stories. There's a book that was published around this, and these images have a lot of context to them. So if you do have some time, I have some of those copies with me if anyone wanted to just have a skim or just purchase that as well. So yeah, this is around kind of various rites of passage and how these images, these 3 images are connected. This image of this woman, this man, and this boy finally performing the ceremony of manhood, and how those 3 stories are connected is something that I cannot really go so deeply into, but just kind of making a connection between sacrifice and manhood, and how those 2 things are an interesting connection in the way that we kind of try and navigate masculinity in our society.
When you think about what's happening in the world, on the one hand, it's shrinking. You know, we see the internet and live feeds and YouTube, and that means that nobody around the world should be a stranger. And that should be bringing us closer together, because it should remind us that we're all fundamentally the same in terms of our aspirations, our hopes, our love for our children. But it's disorienting. And so a lot of people pull back into their own specific identities as their race, their tribe, their religion. And that's a dangerous thing, because it can splinter people and cause conflict. And people can decide that because this person doesn't worship the same God or doesn't look like me, then I don't have to have the same consideration for them. You know, there are a whole host of ways in which that can lead then to conflict. And so one of the critical ingredients of any effort for peace is my ability to stand in your shoes, to see through your eyes, to constantly imagine what's it like being a mother in Bangladesh right now, and if the waters were rising because of climate change. That kind of ability to imagine ourselves in different situations helps us then connect with those other people, and hopefully that can be part of what drives us to want to do better on a whole host of things.
Great. So that was a piece that was created as part of the documentary for the Tribe project that I created, which he perfectly summed up the reason why I decided to venture into Ethiopia, to try and find what it means to be connected to the human tribe, not to the racial tribe or religious tribe, but to the human tribe, which was the core. And I wanted to explore through all these different villages and tribes that I spent time with, what was the connecting thread, and the connecting thread was the humanity thread. And that's what I wanted to use to then create this project, which explores all those things, which, as I highlighted before, is the book and the project called Tribe, which is just about trying to connect us as a human tribe as opposed to as these silos of tribes that we create. So yeah, as I said, I have this book that you can skim through afterwards or purchase if you want to. And these are just some images. I had an exhibition around that. And yeah, I had some actors imagine some of those tribes and how people interacted with that from an immersive perspective in a gallery. They expected to come in and see pictures, and they saw real human beings who were reimagining the ideas of being tribal people. So which brings me on to this project, which again, we will see the connection. Can anyone tell me what they see in these images? What do we see? Smiles, people. What else? Colors. Expression. Okay, so everyone on this collage are strangers. Never knew them, never met them. So it's a project I created called Smile, where I wanted to stop strangers in the streets, especially in a city like London, as you can imagine how friendly we all are. Heading out into the streets to strangers and actually stopping them in their tracks and just asking two questions. What makes you smile and what will make you smile more? And then photographing those people and then sharing that online to show that what we often think, the perceptions we often have of ourselves or other people, are often rooted sometimes in actually not having an alternative perspective, because we've never met enough of those people, we don't know. So we just form based on information that we've taken in from various mediums. And actually, when we strip it back and realize that majority of people, no matter what our walk of life, our religion, or our race, whatever, most people probably want to smile about the same thing. Most people would love to connect with human beings based on the things that we share. And when you look at just a random person, you might realize actually, I was so shocked that a man who's a Sikh smiles about the same thing as a transgender person who is from England. Like, as simple as that is, but that was a gateway to start to create much more human connections and allowing us to reconnect with what honestly is within our souls as human beings, to connect with people. So I'm just going to do a quick exercise to see what some of us think. So can anyone share what they think makes this man smile, please? Anyone? Any ideas what we think makes him smile?
The memory of his grandma's apple pie.
Great, I love that, very specific. Any other guesses? His relationship. Tattoos, okay. Did anyone see that coming? No. Okay, interesting. What do you think makes him smile more?
Seeing more later love.
Okay.
Having a dog.
Having a dog. I think we almost nailed that over there. Great. But again, before approaching him, I had no idea that that's what he would have smiled about. I was probably leaning towards the tattoos, because again, that's all my brain is accustomed to knowing and just making assumptions, very lazy ones. And until I approached him, was I able to challenge it and think, oh my God, why would he not just want to see puppies? Like, why not? You know? And this lady over here, what do we think makes her smile?
Being warm.
Being warm? Any others?
Flowers.
Flowers, okay. Seeing other people smile makes her smile, and other people's happiness makes her smile. Again, what do you think would make us smile more? Any ideas?
More smiles.
More time, having more time to do things that she loves. Again, because a city like London, it's a place where we often never think we have enough time. And that was something that she wished she could kind of reinstate. And this is maybe I'll just skim through this one because we don't have a whole lot of time. I'll do 1, 2, and what do you think makes her smile? Any ideas?
Vodka.
Vodka. What else?
Grandchildren.
Grandchildren. Interesting. She says it comes from within. And that's such a beautiful reminder for me, just how much agency we have on our own happiness and smiles. And then lastly, what do you think will make us smile more? Any guesses?
An end to Brexit.
Only if. And this was it. This was really touching. Again, I was a stranger to her. And for her to open up and explore that with me was quite empowering, but also really sobering as well in my thoughts. So I'll skim through this real quick. As I said, this is a project called Smile. Sarima, what makes you smile?
I think my having faith and hope in myself and projecting that outwardly. There's always something to smile about.
That's great. And what do you think will make you smile even more if you had the power to make it happen?
I think if I had the power to make more people empathetic and considerate to other people's situation and just, trying to be more understanding of like where other people come from, even if they don't express their stories, but maybe reading it from like their energy and body language and just being that positive presence.
Ask you what makes you smile again.
Nature.
Yeah? What about nature?
The connectivity with nature, the silence of nature, simplicity of nature.
That makes you smile.
And from ages and ages, we are like, whatever, we get everything from nature.
Right.
But in return, we are just spoiling it.
Right.
She is giving us everything.
Right.
To our family, our kids, our parents, grandparents. She is like protecting us, and what I feel bad that in return we are just spoiling that. So for me, like development today, people say development is like this country is very developed. So they think like the big buildings, the skylines of those countries and big highways, industries, these are development. But I think the real development is more plant, more trees, the saving of rivers, the saving of glaciers. If you are saving this, then you are more developed rather than big buildings and artificial and materialistic things.
That's amazing. And what will make you smile more? I think you might have touched a bit on it, but what will make you smile even more?
You want me to speak truth?
Yes, only the truth.
When smoke.
That's good, that's true.
Smoke lot of chill up.
Yeah.
Just think of Bhole Baba, bum bum.
Okay, thank you so much. Right, as I said, these are a series of photographs and videos that I collect from people all across the world, trying to share the common humanity that we all have and just trying to reconnect with that as a human tribe. So, any benefits of smiling that we can think of besides the first one, connecting with strangers? Any ideas of other benefits?
It makes you happy. It makes your brain happy.
Absolutely, we're gonna get to that. It's one of those for sure, because we release dopamine when we smile, and actually that's the feel-good hormone in our brain. And when we smile, actually, it triggers that release, and we feel good. And often we think it's the other way around. We need to be happy to smile, and actually, scientifically, when we smile, we can be happy. So it's important to understand the agency and the power that we have in making that happen. So therefore, when we release more dopamine, we reduce the levels of cortisol that we release. So yes, Al is signaling to me we have 5 minutes, and I'm going to make that happen real quick. So yeah, these are just some things, and I'm just going to get into my next project, because after the Smile project, we kind of transitioned into Smile and Voice project, as I talked about in the beginning, about how that was inherently underpinning all the work that I create. Again, what do we see here? Any guesses or just thoughts, not even guesses? What do we see? What is the first feelings or emotions that we see from looking at images of these? Any ideas? Warmth and happiness. What else? Personality. Again, all those things are very vital. But what's really interesting is this project is my current kind of project in terms of just the outward-facing project and how that's gaining a lot of momentum, because these are young black boys and most people don't have images or imaginations of young black boys like this. When we open a newspaper, especially recently, with a lot of talk about youth violence and stabbings and serious crimes, these are the images that come to people's minds, and often there's a sinister approach to that and how they are presented in the media with hoodies and a lot of these damning stories and representations. And what I wanted to do was to challenge that narrative and to use smiling as an opportunity to let people reconnect, to rehumanize these young people. These are 13, 14-year-old boys, and often the world treats them as men, as in most cases violent men that people cross the street from because they have a perception that is driven by a lot of a narrative that we now know to be the truth in our society. And I wanted to use this project as an opportunity to challenge that. So I work with about 50 young black boys predominantly in London to empower them with mental health research and use that to create internal narratives as to how their real lives are and how we can then start to understand their lives from their eyes and their perspective. And the project is, for those who love stats, these are some of the stats that come out of the project. It's improved a lot of these young people in significant ways. And there were exhibitions at the City Hall, which was running for the whole of October, and that opened the door to a lot of political conversations about challenging the narratives and the provisions that are present for these young boys to thrive in a society that does not put their well-being at the fore. And Sadiq Khan, we have to put that in there. But what was really great about that was trying to have conversations now about putting things in place to empower and to provide opportunities for young boys like that to actually thrive on a well-being front. And I mean, I brought as many of them into City Hall, and that's the first time they've ever entered a building like that. Not just as strangers, but as people were like, oh my God, your picture's downstairs. Can I take a picture with you? And they came out to the balcony like, oh my God, this is a view of London. They have the right to have this view of London, but they don't ever. So that was super powerful to be able to allow these young boys to invade a space like that. So I guess the last bit is a call to action for all of us. How are we reconnecting with our lost selves? That's a question we need to ask ourselves on a daily basis. Because I asked this question to myself is why I started to explore all the mediums in which I used to create the things that I create. Photography, poetry, film, plays, all of that. I am not a specialist. I didn't study any of those things. But I just pick them up and think, I'm going to find out how to use a camera. I'm going to find out how to write a story on stage. That's not my world, but I'm learning that. And that's important for us to keep asking ourselves, how can we reconnect with our lost selves? And the last one is, what can we do to provide space? One of the key words, provide space for voices which are never really being heard to be amplified. What can we do with a platform like this, with your platforms, your everyday lives, in your workplace, in your whatever kind of associations? What can you be doing more to amplify voices of people who are not being heard because they're marginalized or because they're deemed the lost ones? That's the final kind of call to action I'm going to place on our hands. And the last one is, if anyone has opportunities to kick down doors and bring in smiling boys into the political discourse or wider artistic discourse, please get in touch with me. My socials, I'm sure, will be up here at some point. Thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions, I'm sure, I don't know if there's time for that, but yes, thank you so much for having your ear today.